This is the GamesIndustry.biz Microcast, recorded on Friday the 21st of June 2024. I'm James Batchelor, Editor-in-Chief of GamesIndustry.biz. I'm joined as always by Head of GamesIndustry.biz, Chris Dring. Chris, I have to ask, how smug are you feeling right now? Because we had a conversation shortly after recording the last Microcast, I think, about what might come up at the Nintendo Direct. And I was absolutely convinced that we weren't going to see Metroid Prime 4 until Switch 2 lineup at least. And that there wouldn't be much of a lineup. Like Nintendo won't have much because it's tail end of the tail end of the Switch's life cycle. Sorry, and you annoyingly were right.
Well, I think it's a little bit different between prediction and hope. If you look back on my tweets, so I did a tweet where I think I tweeted this is before Sony, before the whole period. I said, if this period of announcements can deliver for me new updates on Astrobot, Fable and Metroid Prime, I would proclaim it the best Summer Games Fest since it was called E3. Right, I think that was the tweet I did. And by the way, that wasn't a prediction. I just wanted to see updates. So if I had to pick the PlayStation game I wanted to hear from, and the Xbox game I wanted to hear about, and the Nintendo game I wanted to hear about, those were the three. And they happened to all three hit. So I guess that's the best one we've had since E3, which I think is actually true. The only reason why I thought it might happen is because I'm pretty much sure this is the last direct of Switch's life cycle, right? So if you've got a Switch game, then I thought that it would probably feature in this one. Although Pokemon Legends wasn't in there, so
I do wonder, like, because we still don't know when Switch 2 is coming out. If Switch 2 is tail end of 2025, I wonder if we'll get a January-February direct as the last mop-up. But this is the last Q4 for Switch on its own. Yeah,
but we also got hints of stuff. We've got a January game, and there was a Metroid game, and Pokemon Legends is coming. I suspect, if Switch 2, there's so much like guesswork because we're looking at Switch 1 as like a template, right? So people are going, maybe September, October, Nintendo will do the teaser for Switch 2, and then come January they'll reveal the Switch 2 lineup. Which and then Switch 2 will launch in March, right? It's that sort of.
But then we said that last year. We were expecting like March 2024. So yeah.
So, but if they do that, then I suspect we've seen the Switch lineup for the rest of the rest of the generation, unless there's a few other games they're going to announce for Switch 2 that are also for past generations. But yeah, no, it was a good direct though, wasn't it?
It was a really solid direct. Like, it was a lot better than I was expecting. So, I mean, just not random highlights, but like basic highlights of, you've got Metroid Prime 4 is coming out 2025. Zelda Echoes of Wisdom, the first game where you actually play as Zelda, and it really plays in with the experimentation elements of Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild. That's coming out September. You've got a new Mario and Luigi, the first Mario and Luigi in about 9 years, original Mario and Luigi in about 9 years, coming out in November. There's a new Mario Party, I think that was October, and then ton of third-party stuff as well. For this late in the life cycle, it's a really solid lineup. There's plenty in there.
I think sometimes we judge Nintendo by their console standards. Actually, handhelds do tend to have quite a good afterlife. I think even the 3DS, when the Switch had come out, still had a Metroid game that launched and a Pokemon game that launched, and it looks like we might have a similar situation here. Also, by the way, the last Zelda, there was a Zelda game that featured. You played as Zelda.
We're not counting
Wands of Gamelon.
We're not counting Philips CDI games. We're not counting those.
But I think it's interesting. I think it's all expectations are such an important part of this, right? Because I expected PlayStation's state of play to be weak. And it was weak, right? And it was probably weaker than I thought it was. I was expecting some tease for something they had beyond this year. They just focus on the games coming up, right? And the games coming up are, let's be clear, Astrobot's amazing, right? And I actually think that game might be, it's topped the IGN wishlist charts. I think that game might be better than people think it might, because the previous sort of tech demo game thing that was bundled with the console, so lots of people have played that. And if you've played it, it's brilliant. So I think it might do better than maybe a Ratchet and Clank and a Sackboy would have done previously. I'm not going to bet the house on it, but I played it. It's amazing. It took about 3 years to make. 60 people made it. I think it fits in with. I think it's going to be a interesting little project, that one. But outside of that, it wasn't the strongest showing from PlayStation, because they're clearly the days of them teasing something that's 2 or 3 years out, they don't do it anymore. Xbox's was more traditional E3 press conference, in that they had stuff for this year, brilliant stuff for this year, like Indiana Jones and Avowed and stuff we knew about. And then they've got stuff for next year. We've got a good idea now of what they've got coming in 2025. And we've got an idea of what they've got in 2026 and beyond as well, because they showed off some Perfect Dark and Gears of War, which weren't dated. So I think it was I think Xbox had a more traditional conference. I did say that I'd like to see a bit more variety from Xbox, but I know they have that variety. Like, we know they do Minecraft. We know they've got a game with Toys for Bob. They invest like hundreds of millions, maybe even $1 billion in funding games from sort of new markets and new places all over the place. So they do have those games. Just we didn't see too much of it.
You never know what's going to come out of left field from one of their studios. Stuff like Hi-Fi Rush, stuff like Pentiment, those were announced kind of without warning, rather than at one of their major showcases. It's
just that stuff doesn't hit. These moments, right? So I did say I'd love to have seen a bit more variety, a little bit more colour. I think on the stage that wasn't. It's a big fantasy game. It's a big shooter. I'd like to see a bit of variety. But that's more about my personal taste in games. And Doom and Gears of War are very different games, but they look quite similar, right? And they bookended the conference. So with Xbox, let's be clear, by far the best, the strongest. We've got a good indicator. We know what they got this year. We know what they've got, a good indicator of what they got going forward. So it was a very strong press conference from them. And I think Nintendo, I wasn't expecting much. I was hoping for Zelda, maybe remasters or something. I certainly wasn't expecting an original Zelda. And in fact, when the event started, because Nintendo have I've watched enough directs now, they have a big game at the beginning, they have a big game in the middle, and they have a big game at the end, right? And you can tell how good the direct's going to be sometimes by how big the game at the beginning is. And when it was Mario and Luigi, Brotherhood or something, or
Brothership.
Brothership, I was a bit like, it's the third Mario RPG in 12 months. And Mario and Luigi's not the biggest franchise.
Yeah, I was the same. It's like this is a fun little opening, but this is not going to be massive, and that kind of lowered my expectations for the rest of the direct.
Yeah, and the November date made me go, "Is this your Christmas game?" Jesus.
Yeah.
And then when the middle game was Zelda, the middle game is often the weakest, right? They often put the smaller one in the middle, and it's Zelda. Hang on, Zelda's in the middle. I knew then.
Yeah.
It was going to end on Metroid. It was. But yeah, the Zelda. And let's be clear. I can't quite. I'm gonna have to look it up. I can't quite remember how many Link's Awakening remake sold. But 2D Zelda games aren't anything like.
Certainly nothing compared to the last two. The last two have sold tens of millions.
Oh, okay. So Link's Awakening, as of December 2022, Link's Awakening, the 2019 remake, did about 6.5 million copies.
That's not too bad.
So probably that's nice. That's actually in the spectrum of Zelda sales.
Yeah.
That's actually very high. But obviously you look at Tears of the Kingdom is 20 million plus, and Breath of the Wild was 30 million plus. So you're sort of going. It's not in that sort of. Bracket, but it's a decent. That's not bad sales. That'll be all right. And I think it was very fan favourite. You had a Mario game, a new Mario game. It isn't a remaster. You had a new Zelda game, and you had a new Metroid game, and that's sort of. Metroid's not the biggest franchise outside of Japan, but I think it could be outside of America. Sorry, but I think it could be. Because I think that's one of those. Nintendo have managed to turn some of their sort of smaller franchises into real hits this generation, like Luigi's Mansion, which was already a modest hit, but now it's like a mega hit. Even Pikmin's starting to step up now into that.
Metroid Dread did so much better than, from what I remember, Metroid Dread did so much better than 2D Metroids tend to do.
It's actually, I think Metroid Dread's the best-selling Metroid game.
Yeah.
It is, but like, we're talking into the low millions here. We're not
Right.
talking the sort of tens of millions that Nintendo games can
No, but
do.
it's still showing signs of growth that Prime could potentially capitalise on.
I've always felt Metroid's an unfortunate franchise, right? Super Metroid was obviously arrived on the SNES, and it was a very thing. There was, but Metroid Prime, which is probably the first moment that Metroid could have broken out into something bigger, launched on a failure of a console.
Yeah.
They did have Metroid Prime on the Wii, but you could argue that the audience wasn't right for it. Then they did try very hard with Metroid on the Wii, and then they've just not had the and a lot of the times they have a Metroid game, it's at the end of a life cycle or something, like the Samus Returns game. So I've always felt there's a series that a Metroid Prime on a platform that has a large audience of engaged players, I think has a chance. It could break through. So I hope it does. I hope Nintendo go for it, and but it's late in the Switch life cycle.
It is.
So
What are your
maybe this is also unfortunate.
What are your thoughts on, like, obviously the speculation at the moment is, because it visually looked quite impressive. The speculation is that this is going to be Nintendo's cross-gen titles. The last few console generations, obviously, ironically with Zelda games, like, it was Breath of the Wild was Wii U and Switch. Twilight Princess was GameCube and Wii. The speculation is that Metroid Prime 4 is the Switch 2 game.
Yeah, I think it's an assumption. It's an
assumption.
It's a graphically intensive game launching at the end of a life cycle of one console, and in a world where backwards compatibility and forwards, is sort of the norm. So the idea of having it so it runs a little bit faster. And to be fair, Nintendo have done this in the past. Actually, you put Pokemon Yellow into a Game Boy Color, and you've got a slightly better version of Pokemon Yellow. So it's not unheard of, and I wouldn't be surprised if that is what's going to happen here. I think it's worth reminding people Metroid Prime isn't a huge franchise. No. It is critically loved and fans adore it, but in Nintendo's, like, it's one of the it's Mario Party would be a bigger launch title than Metroid Prime.
Yeah.
So it's much bigger. So I made a joke tweet years ago when Animal Crossing came out and sold like bajillion copies in like 3 weeks. I made a comment about how in 3 weeks Animal Crossing on Switch had sold more copies than Metroid series has sold in its entire lifetime, right? And that is that. And yeah, it was not to insult Metroid. It was just to praise.
No, but to put Animal Crossing in context. Yeah.
But let's say that it is a loved franchise. It deserves to do so much better. But you wouldn't. It's not like not like Zelda. Get Zelda out at launch and it will do really well. It's not even Zelda. Even then, like, by comparison to Mario, it's a much smaller franchise. But anyway, we're spending a lot of time talking about Metroid.
We are.
I thought it was a good direct. It's interesting. I don't think it was. I didn't see anything massive in it. Metroid isn't from a commercial perspective.
Yeah.
Metroid isn't the biggest franchise. Mario and Luigi's hardly gonna.
The Mario Party Jamboree might do well.
Yeah, but it's still the third Mario Party.
Yeah, that's true.
I think there's going to be some diminishing returns there. But there's lots of games and there's stuff for the fans, and I think there's plenty of stuff to sort of see them through to keep their audience engaged and see them through to the.
It's a far cry from, like, I keep thinking back to, like, past, and I mean really past Nintendo consoles, like the GameCube and the N64, where there would just be like a quiet year, like it'd be like a year.
Wii U was like that as well.
Wii U as well. Like, you basically have up to a year without first party releases as it geared up to the next console, and the directs show that they're not necessarily doing that. Like, there are, I mean,
I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised though, with the exception of Metroid, if most of the stuff they showed is outsourced. But I am. One thing I was going to add is actually. You know what looked lovely? It was the Lego game from Guerrilla and Sony and Studio.
Lego Horizons, yeah. Lego Horizons Adventures.
It was just for all, and I think that's nice when you see that Metroid Prime is able to do this on Switch, and Lego Horizons is able to do this on Switch. Oh, they are. Yeah. Yes, they're able to get a bit more out of this machine.
Absolutely.
8 years in.
So, last thing I'd say about the Direct before we kind of move on to a kind of broad topic is kind of go back to your point about how Nintendo, like, the handhelds usually had good kind of quality of life after the successor came out. Like this Direct, for me, more than any other, really kind of emphasised how Nintendo bringing its handheld and home console divisions together, and essentially bringing its handheld and home console together into one device rather than having two, really shows like they've been almost like hampering themselves in past generations, because, like, if you look at, like, the Wii first party lineup and the DS first party lineup, they're both decent. They've both got some great games. But if you combine them, and that's what we've got with the Switch generation, is you've got all the great stuff they brought to handheld, all the great stuff they brought to home console on one machine. It really shows how strong Nintendo's lineup has been combined lineup has been over the years, but it's been split. That might just be me, but that was my thought.
Well, I think they've been able to. Here's the thing: I don't actually think, if you look at the Wii and then look at the DS lineup, I don't think, for starters, Wii and DS did have 250 million consoles between them, right? It's a very, very successful machine. But if you look at, like, if you take the Wii, right, there were 2 Mario games on the Wii. There were 2 Zelda games on the Wii.
Yeah.
There were 2 Metroid games on the Wii, right? There were, and it was a shorter life cycle, that console. And there was a lot of games that came out on it. And it's the same with the DS had tons of first-party games, but their games were made a lot faster back then. Like this is, I know we're old, James. Like this is the days when you make a game in a couple of years, and now it takes you 5-6 years. So I think what Nintendo's been by combining their teams together, it has allowed them to continue to make games at a regular clip. But then so has the fact they've done a lot of remasters, a lot of Wii ports, and it's made the console feel quite full. And I think that's the challenge they've got for the next generation. And we know that they're out there trying to talk with developers, trying to get more games made because they don't have all that Wii U back catalogue to lean on this time. And they're obviously trying to make the most of the stuff they've got. And look, I'm sure they'll do that. I'm sure they'll get there. But I think at the moment the market needs. This is the thing. Like we're talking about game announcements, right? And we've been out to LA and we've seen some really cool games, really exciting, and but for me, it hasn't changed. The story on either side of that event is the same, right? We went into that week with layoffs at Take-Two and Microsoft. We came out of the week immediately hit with the layoffs at Sumo.
Yeah.
The message from people is this is bad. Like I've got the sales figures. I've just done the sales figures for Europe. May is brutal, right? And it's okay. The comparison because Zelda was last year, right? And Zelda. To put it in context, Zelda sold more units by itself in May last year than the entire top 12 combined this year.
Wow!
Right? So it's sort of like it's going to affect the numbers, but it's not the comparisons are brutal. There are no games out. Nobody's advertising. People are cutting back their projects quite aggressively now, which means there's less opportunity for service-based businesses. So we're starting to see. Those sort of work for hire studios and those sort of businesses having to scale back a little bit. It is really tough. And we said it. People had a go at us earlier in the year about being negative around the games industry and saying that we're in for up to 2 years of pain. And if you read the article, it's like 2 years of really difficult headlines, but actually 1 year before things start looking a bit more positive again. And then we had some positive news around GDC, and there's obviously we've gone through a load of game announcements. There's a bit of hope in all this, but I think some people I know got a bit carried away and were thinking, oh, we were bouncing back. We're not bouncing back. We are. We are now in the moment of real tough. This summer's going to be really difficult, and there will be a lot more stories, a lot more layoffs, a lot more corrections going on between now and Christmas, and the market's not going to pick up until September at the earliest.
No.
So it is a really brutal time. We are halfway through it though, so if you're still here, we've got another 6 months before hopefully we start to see some investment come back into games and some in a more significant way than we are, and some recruitment hopefully as well. But it's not. This is what we're talking about Nintendo Directs and stuff, and it's like there is this. The industry is still very much on fire.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's really difficult. Like it's just this last week alone. Like compiling the GI newsletter. Like the sort of discussions that are being had. Like it's not just the short to mid term, as you say. Like we've still got up to another year, 18 months of really difficult times before things really start. It should hopefully uptick at some point in the near term, but it's still going to be tough. Like even the longer term view is so difficult. Like the conversations we've been seeing this week. So we're running GI Sprint at the moment, 3 weeks of guides on how to make games cheaper, faster, and better, largely to kind of help developers think about how they can kind of counter the rising cost of development. And hopefully avoid cuts and things like this. And some of the conversations we've had around this. So you did an excellent interview with Sean Layden, and that inevitably went on to about how unsustainable the AAA end of the games industry certainly is. And roughly the same time you had your conversation with Sean and Michael Pachter and Van Burnham in IGN Live talking about the future of the console, and the fact that you said earlier, like the Wii DS generation, 250 million combined units. We've not really grown beyond that, and it's you did an opinion piece that based on all the I think you wrote this you wrote this like just after the direct, like about looking at the lineup we saw in the last couple of weeks. There's nothing there that suggests this massive growth that the industry needs is coming. Like a lot of the platform holders are kind of playing to the established audiences. Like there's just a lot of things that's like we're getting by. The industry's getting by. The industry will get through this really tough period. But in terms of how it grows going forward and hopefully perhaps avoids this sort of thing, it's just really it's a tough conversation to have.
Well, yeah. So I think okay. I think it's just there's an element of reality here. A lot of the times when I was talking in that piece about there wasn't much to make me go, oh, that's the future of games, is because I am often used to going to an E3 and seeing Sony reveal Wonderbook, or here's Xbox showing, Sony doing PlayLink, or Xbox showing a new HoloLens or something really cool, and they go, oh, that's the future of games. Here's the thing: none of those were the future of games.
No, that's true. No,
but it was you saw companies trying to innovate, often from a hardware perspective. It wasn't a hardware E3 or whatever you want to call this period. Let's call it E3. Fuck it.
Yeah.
It wasn't a hardware show. It was and the games that will hit, and Jeff Keighley said this at the beginning of here, I said it in my opinion piece, the games that will turn out to be the biggest games probably weren't, well, they might have been in the Microsoft, Sony, and Nintendo, but they probably weren't Doom, and they probably weren't Zelda. It'll probably be, the game where you play as a bean or something during the wholesome direct or something. So there's that, right? But it's worth remembering that the games industry is doing things that's going to grow it. It's just going to grow it in a far more steady way. People looking for that double-digit percentage growth, that's probably over, right, for the games. And that's not a bad thing. We're getting at one point it was going to stop. There's a couple of things you need to remember. The games industry is still young, which means there are still generations upon generations upon generations of people alive today that didn't grow up with video games. My parents didn't grow up with video games, and they are, they're only just retiring, right? So it's not. So we have still got the natural happen as more digital natives come through that are playing games. Yes, there's a challenge around those digital natives that are just playing Fortnite and nothing else. But Fortnite putting games in their platform that allow people to play and experience different things. You've got people like Game Pass and what Xbox is doing to try and make people play more games and not just the same old games. So there is some activity going on in that space. You've also got things like AAA games in other markets, and to reach out for more people is happening in mobile, right? So yes, there's a good question mark about the business model around that, whether people really want that.
Yeah.
But Assassin's Creed Mirage is on iPhone.
I read that Shadows is coming to iPhone as well? Like,
I don't know.
I'm pretty sure I read that Shadows come to iPhone. So like Ubisoft are clearly going for this.
I'm sure Apple have given them an incentive to do it.
Oh yeah.
But we've got to sort of say, if you're trying to get your game into new markets and reach new people, putting it on mobile is going to be a crucial part of doing that. You need to work out the business model. There's certain bits that we're not quite there on yet, but that's an opportunity for us. Taking our content, I hate the word content, but taking our games and putting it in TV and film, and we're just on the Fallout. We've seen the Last of Us TV show, saw the Mario movie, all in the last 18 months, and been real hits. We've seen our medium expand into new areas, finding new people that way. You've also got the opportunity that streaming might provide further down the line. Will it? I don't know. There is hope, right? There is new things happening. If you look at the console space, the audience hasn't grown, and it's harder to add much more monetization in that space, and that's where people are saying there's some real challenges. But then we just need to work harder at making games that appeal to different markets, adopt different business models that make it more accessible for people in different markets. But also, even if we don't do that, you're gonna make sure we're making games that older people can play, rather than continually making 100-hour, 120-hour AAA epics. Like I'm 39, I've got 2 kids. I don't have time to play your Elden Ring. I'm sorry. Give me something that I want to. Give me something that's a little bit more bite-sized, and we're starting to see a little bit more of that as well from games companies. So my point is, that there's no magic bullet. I can't see one. I can't see a VR on the horizon, or a digital distribution on the horizon, or a new platform that's suddenly going to make the games industry go from 2 or 3% growth to 20% growth. But I can see us getting to a point where if we just get ourselves into a sustainable position where we continue to create more diverse stuff, and we've got to learn from the movie industry and the TV industry, and lesser extent the music industry, about the mistakes they made in this push, and make sure that we stay on track with it. But right now we are in this horrific correction, and there is concern around where's the growth going to come from and stuff like that from an investor perspective. But from a business perspective, a industry that's growing 5-6% a year every year for the next whatever years is a perfectly happy, sustainable, livable industry. We just need to try and get through this bit, and then hopefully we can have a better time afterwards. So I hear what you're saying. What is the growth? Where's the growth coming from? it's just going to come from new people, new markets, and we just need to find. And to reach those people, we've got to do it the hard way. We've got to make games they want to play.
Yeah. Who'd have thought? I'm going to end on that slightly hopeful note then. Let's wrap up there. We are going to be back next week, next Friday. We're going to try shifting the Microcast to Fridays now, to kind of give you a kind of look back on the week, the week that has been, which means next Friday's episode may well be later than usual because I will be in Brazil at Gamescom Latam. So another transatlantic and our first trans-hemisphere Microcast, so it should be interesting to record. Chris, thank you so much for joining me as always. Listeners, viewers, however you choose to enjoy the Microcast, thank you so much for joining us. Please do go over to GamesIndustry.biz, check out the GI Sprint series. We're going to be running it until July 5th. Plenty of really kind of interesting guides and advice coming from there. Really kind of good stuff that's making you think about how people are making games. Like again, like the making smaller games, making not making 100-hour epics. That's been kind of a regular topic, and there's some really interesting kind of thoughts on and different approaches to this. So yes, GI Sprint, please do check that out, and you can of course get more news, insight, and analysis into the world behind video games over at GamesIndustry.biz. Thank you so much. We'll see you next week.